want y'all to imagine a hypothetical situation for a moment, all right? You're out driving in your car, and one of these crazy Texas drivers, certainly no one here, runs you straight off of the road and into a lake, all right? And you're okay, at least at first, but your car is filling up fast, murky lake water, right? So you try to break through a window, but you can't. You try to open the door, but it's stuck. And to make matters worse, no other drivers saw you go off the side of the road. The guy who ran you off the road, he's long gone, right? So you're on your own. So there you are, you're slowly sinking, and there's no one there to help. But then all of a sudden, some luck. Even though there's nobody up there on the road, there happened to be a fisherman, right, along the shore of the lake. He saw your car go into the water. It's a big, burly, stocky, strong-looking guy. So you're thinking, all right, I might make it out of this mess after all. The man comes running over to you. He stands at the water's edge, where your car is, and he's waving frantically to get your attention. You make eye contact with him, awaiting to hear his instructions, right? What is he going to tell you? What is his escape plan for you? So he cups his hands around his mouth, and he yells as loud as he can, "Relax, relax. Everything is going to be all right. Relax. Everything's going to be all right." And then he just stands there. 5 seconds pass, 10 seconds pass, the water, it's up to the steering wheel now. You're getting nervous. You're waiting for this guy to jump in the water, maybe. You're waiting for him to take out his cell phone, maybe call 911. You're waiting for him to do literally anything at all. As the water goes higher and higher, all you can see is this guy just standing on the shore, watching you sink, telling you to relax. Everything is going to be all right. But how can you relax if your rescuer has come to you empty-handed? I feel like this is the frightening predicament that so much of the world faces today, particularly as our culture grows more and more secular. So many of us find ourselves trapped in places of fear. We might even feel as if we are sinking, maybe slowly, maybe very rapidly. And so we're waving for help. No one wants to sink, of course. We frantically pound on the windows of this sinking car, but it seems that everyone who is on the shore, all of our possible rescuers, they've all come empty-handed. We face, as a culture, record levels of existential anxiety, depression. People everywhere are living with internalized shame and regret. There's a general sense, I think these days, a general sense of pessimism and hopelessness regarding the future. People are feeling, in a word, broken. There's a lot of brokenness, right? There's brokenness out there. There's certainly brokenness in here, too. There's brokenness right here. Promise you that. But where do we often turn? Where do we turn? To man, right? We turn to man. Our culture is spiritually dying. We have a spiritual illness. And yet we are turning to man for rescue. We're turning to man to fix spiritual problems. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some great politicians out there, as hard as that sometimes is to believe. They're out there, I promise. There are skilled doctors everywhere you look. There are well-trained mental health professionals in every neighborhood. There are selfless police officers and courageous firefighters and EMTs and people with servants' hearts everywhere, all across the globe, right here in this church. But if we are looking for those people to free us from spiritual illness, they are always going to appear lacking. They're always going to appear empty-handed. As effective as they might be in their particular fields, right? They might tell you, relax, everything is going to be all right. But when it comes to our spiritual chains, what tools do they really have to set us free? If they're drawing only from their own human wisdom, what tools do they have to free us from spiritual imprisonment? You know, a few days ago, we were having dinner, the friars, and I was telling the other guys, Father Mike and Father John Mark, that I read this gospel, the one you just heard. I read it like 10 times, trying to prepare to write a homily for this weekend. Every single time, it was just like I was reading Mandarin Chinese. It was a really strange experience. I just kept reading it over and over again, and nothing was sticking, nothing at all. Sure, you've got the Doubting Thomas story here, very obvious kind of story to dive into, but for some reason, it just didn't feel like that's what the Lord was kind of leading me towards today. So I did what any priest would do in this situation. I went on YouTube and I typed in Divine Mercy homily. I was hoping something would just spark some kind of idea, right? And I saw a little video there from Bishop Barron, one of my favorite homilists in the whole world. And I opened up the video, and this was, I think, maybe a homily from last year, a couple years ago. I opened up the video, and it played for literally 1.5 seconds. That's all it could have been, 2 seconds maybe. Bishop Barron said 4 words. He said, "Peace be with you." Peace be with you. That's his typical greeting. If you watch his videos, he says that in every single one of his videos. But for whatever reason, it struck me, it just hit me right in the face. There's something about this greeting. This is not a normal greeting. It just really resonated with me in that moment. And then I went back and I reread the gospel, right? I said I read it 10 times. I went back and I read it for that 11th time. All of a sudden, clarity this time. Not a particularly long gospel today, right? But you know how many times Jesus says, "Peace be with you" in today's gospel? 3 times. 3 times he says it in this gospel. And you better believe this, if Jesus says it 3 times, he means it. He means it. If he says it once, he means it. But if he says it 3 times, he really means it, right? There's something special here. This is not a kind of routine greeting, right? Just a cordiality, kind of how are you all doing, howdy type thing, right? No, Jesus really means the specifics of this greeting. Peace be with you. Shalom, right? Peace be with you. Jesus is walking in. Remember, this is the day of resurrection, right? He is walking into a room, in effect, a room full of prisoners. They're prisoners because they're afraid of what the Jewish authorities could do to them if they found out that they were followers of Jesus. This is a very real fear, of course. They just crucified the Lord. They're thinking, are we next? We spent time with this guy. Are we next? So they're prisoners because they're afraid. They're prisoners because of their hopelessness, of course. Jesus, in whom they had put all of their faith, well, he's dead, apparently, right? And they're also prisoners because of their regret. Their regret. They had abandoned their friend. They had abandoned Jesus when things got scary, abandoned their master. Jesus walks into this environment, an environment where people are anxious and hopeless and filled with shame. And he says, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." He says, "Relax. Everything is going to be okay." How can he say this? How can he see all of this fear, all of this anxiety, all of this hopelessness, and all of this shame, and say, "Peace. Peace be with you"? It's because Jesus doesn't come empty-handed, right? Jesus is not an empty-handed rescuer. His hands are full. The hands of the Lord are full of the wounds that prove his resurrection, full of the brand marks that herald our redemption. When Jesus walks into that dark, locked room, it's locked, right? That's a key thing here, a locked room. He walks into that dark, locked room. Every one of his disciples there present comes to the knowledge of true mercy for the first time. God's mercy, divine's mercy. They've encountered mercy before, especially in their time spent with Jesus before he went to the cross, right? But now they know without a shadow of doubt this mercy is from God himself. These people In this room locked, they know what the resurrection means. They're faithful Jews. They know what the resurrection means. These people know what it means to see Jesus raised from the dead, just as he said. It means that everything he said is true. He is the Messiah. He is the Redeemer. He is the Son of God. He really can offer forgiveness of sins. He really can open his Father's house, heaven, eternal life, to the repentant. He really did defeat sin and death, and he allows all of us to share in that victory. How can he not say, "Peace be with you"? To encounter God's mercy as the followers of Jesus did in this moment, to encounter God's mercy is the ultimate peace. It's the ultimate freedom from fear, the ultimate rejection of shame, the ultimate departure from hopelessness. Jesus doesn't come into that locked room empty-handed. He comes with filled hands, right? Hands filled with the marks of the cross, hands filled with the mercy that has been won for all of us. You know what? Feel free to accuse me of being overly simplistic. But I feel like the main thing that is wrong with the world today is that not enough people have encountered that mercy. And most of the time, it's through no fault of their own, right? That mercy has not been spread. We've not made knowledge of that mercy available to enough people. Not enough people know what it means to hear those words, "Peace be with you," and have them being spoken by, have them coming from the one who can truly offer that peace, the one who is not empty-handed, the one whose hands are full. I was reading a news story the other day. I debated whether or not to share this with y'all because it's kind of heavy, but it really broke my heart, and I think it's indicative of some of the things that we're facing in our culture. It's a story about a young girl, probably my own age, this poor girl, somewhere I think in Northern Europe. And she's depressed, she's anxious, like many people, right? And her psychologist has told her, no more, right? There's no more that medicine can do for you. There's no more that any treatment can possibly do for you. There's no more that any man in any field, whatever, no more can be done for you. So they've scheduled to send doctors to her home and literally poison her to death. Can you believe that? They call this, of course, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, dignity in dying, what have you. A lot of names for that. I call it what it is. It's killing someone, right? It's murder. It's killing a human being. It's ending a life, all because we tend to be, as humans, so prideful that we believe that if we can't fix a problem through our own merits, well, that problem can't be fixed. If I can't fix you, there's no solution to this. No, don't get me wrong. I know mental health is incredibly complex, complicated subject. I know that anxiety, depression, mental illness, they can prevent clear thinking. I'm aware of that. But you can't tell me for a second that an encounter with divine mercy, the way that the apostles, the followers of the Lord experienced it in this gospel today, an encounter with divine mercy could not be a game changer for such an individual. She doesn't believe her life has a purpose, right? She's probably been told that. Your life doesn't have a purpose. It's not as good as it could be. It doesn't mean anything. She doesn't believe her suffering has a purpose. In her shame, she sees herself as a burden. She sees herself as an obstacle to those around her. And how many people are there out there just like her? That's why I share this. This is not an isolated incident, of course. Thousands, millions of people living with this same mentality. I looked at some of the comments that were at the bottom of the news story. So many people sympathizing with her. Life is hard. Things are scary. It's hard to be a burden. I've thought about doing the same thing. I've thought about the same way out. It's heartbreaking. It is. Imagine if just one person close to this girl or any of these people said, your life is worthwhile. You were made for a purpose. You're made in God's image and likeness. He loves you so much that he wants you to be with him for all eternity. He died for that, right? You are redeemable. You're forgivable. And Jesus, with wounds in his hands, he offers you peace in this prison that perhaps you live in. You know, at a time in my own life, not too far removed from the present time, I was going through a really hard time in the depths of anxiety and depression, and it felt like, how am I ever going to make it from day to day? It lasted an almost entire year of my life when I was in seminary. It was horrible, horrible, horrible experience. But what I needed to hear in that moment was not, there's no hope for you. I needed to know that there is mercy in this situation. There is a plan for my suffering. God is close to those who suffer. And of course, like I said, I'm not naive. I know that an encounter with mercy doesn't necessarily mean that mercy is always received. Sometimes there are blocks, but that encounter can be life-changing. It has a potential to be life-changing. That means that we should give people that opportunity to have that encounter. It can be that glimmer of hope in a dark, locked room. You know, there are just so many people out there in dark, locked rooms. And with many of them, you'd never know. You would never know if you looked. You know, the young woman who lives in prison of shame because she was pressured into having an abortion when she was younger. Some people might never even know that, right? The mother who's been diagnosed with a chronic illness. She suffers silently every single day. The teenager who fears, my grades aren't good enough to get into the college I really want to get into, and now my whole future is uncertain. The old man or old woman who feels the hopelessness of watching their own body deteriorate, their physical body deteriorate. The husband who can't forgive his wife because his parents could never forgive him. And he never knew what forgiveness was, so now he can't offer it to anyone else. You know, a couple years back, I spent a summer as a chaplain in a veterans hospital in Pittsburgh. This was probably 8 years ago now. I'll never forget, near the end of that summer, one of the men with whom I had met almost daily, actually, for probably 3 months, just broke down into tears one day. And came to find he'd been a paratrooper in Vietnam, and he wore around his neck a little St. Michael's medal. A lot of you probably wear the same medal. St. Michael, she shared with me, I didn't know this, the patron saint of paratroopers. Patron saint of paratroopers. And one day I asked, I thought that, it'd be really nice. I said, can I pray the St. Michael's prayer with you? Pray this great prayer with you. And he began to weep. He began to weep. And he had done things in Vietnam, I came to find, that he wished he could forget. He lived in a prison of shame for decades. And all of a sudden, simply having a priest pray with him was enough to knock the lock off of that door. It had probably been locked for 40 years or however long it had been. In my last meeting with him before I left for the summer, we talked about God's mercy. We talked about redemption and hope. We talked about dignity and purpose. And we even talked about the meaning of our suffering. And he had experienced plenty of suffering, not just physical, but mental suffering, mental anguish as well. And I'm not naive. I'm not saying this man was 100% transformed, good as new, that I walked out of the hospital and perfect. He's totally transformed. No, but it helped. It helped. I truly believe that. Jesus doesn't come empty-handed. That's how I know it helped, because Jesus doesn't come empty-handed. His hands are full. His hands are marked. Those marks mean mercy for all of us. And you may feel like you're trapped, right? Trapped inside of that sinking car in the lake. You may feel like you're barricaded in a locked room like our followers of the Lord today, the disciples of the Lord. But Jesus comes as our rescuer in the face of fear, in the face of anxiety, in the face of depression, in the face of uncertainty and hopelessness and shame. His mercy is our peace. May his peace be with you all.